All right. So, Kenya, things are getting pretty intense over there. You've probably seen the news, right? The deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua.
Yeah, facing a potential impeachment. It's a big deal.
Huge. But this isn't just about, another politician in hot water.
Right.
This whole situation, it's really shining a light on something much bigger.
How democracies actually work, especially when it comes to holding leaders accountable.
Exactly. It's one thing to have all these ideals about public participation, but what we're seeing play out in Kenya.
It's a real-time test case.
Totally.
Right.
And let's be real. We're not just talking about some polite debate here. Have you seen the protests? Nyeri, Kiambu.
People are fired up.
Absolutely. They're making their voices heard loud and clear. Okay, so for those of us who haven't exactly memorized Kenya's entire political system, Can you break down exactly what's going on with this impeachment attempt? What are the actual steps involved here?
Sure. So it all started with an MP named Wengi Mutus. He's the one who formally initiated everything. Basically, he's alleging that Gachagua is unfit for office.
Unfit for office. Strong accusation.
It is, and it triggers this whole process. Now, it's important to understand this isn't a trial just yet.
Okay.
Think of it more like an investigation at this point. Parliament has to examine all the claims, see if there's enough evidence to move forward.
And if they decide there is enough evidence,
then they can vote to impeach him.
Okay, so that's where the public participation piece comes in, right?
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting, because this isn't something that happens behind closed doors. Yeah. Kenya's system puts a huge emphasis on gathering public input. We're talking hearings, testimonies, you name it. They're really trying to get a sense of what the people think.
Which is where it gets complicated, right?
Yeah.
Because if those protests are anything to go by, there are serious doubts about how genuine this public input really is.
That's the thing about democracy, isn't it? The ideal is beautiful, right? Citizens having a say in how they're governed.
Sounds great in theory.
Right. But the reality, it's messy.
So messy.
Figuring out how to actually make that happen, make sure everyone's voice is heard. Well, it's a challenge, to say the least. And it has to be done right. I mean, even Justice Richard Mwanga.
Oh, he's a respected legal figure in Kenya, right?
Very much so. He recently made a statement really emphasizing that for public participation to be meaningful, it has to be two things: inclusive and transparent.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So where does someone like Jane Maina fit into all of this?
Ah, yes. Jane Maina. She's a key player in all of this.
She's the Kirinyaga woman representative, right?
Yeah.
She's filed a petition.
That's right. So a petition, basically, it's a formal request to the government. You're asking them to take certain actions or maybe reconsider a decision.
And in this case,
Jane Maina is deeply concerned about the speed of this whole impeachment process. She's arguing that it's just moving too fast for genuine public engagement.
So she's basically saying, slow down.
Exactly. Let's make sure everyone has a real chance to be heard, especially those who might not have the easiest time navigating bureaucracy or who face other kinds of barriers.
So it's one thing to have a system in place for feedback, but if it feels rushed,
it raises questions. Big ones. And that's the crux of it, isn't it? Is this process truly reflecting what the Kenyan people want, or is it more about checking boxes?
And what about Gachagua? I mean, he's not just sitting back and letting this all happen, right?
Oh, absolutely not. He's lawyering up big time.
Right.
He's trying to bring the whole impeachment process to a halt.
On what grounds?
He's arguing that this is all politically motivated.
So he's not going down without a fight.
Not at all. But here's the thing, and this is important. His attempts to pause everything, they're not just about him. This situation raises a bigger question about how we balance individual rights, in this case, Gachagua's right to due process with the public's right to hold their leaders accountable.
It's a tricky balance.
Yeah.
So what happens now? What are we looking at next in terms of how this might unfold?
Well, the courts are going to play a key role here. They're the ones who are going to have to weigh these competing interests. And so far, they haven't taken sides. They've ruled that public participation should continue, but they've also scheduled more hearings to address Gachagua's concerns.
So it's not over yet.
Not by a long shot.
This is one of those situations where it feels like it has implications far beyond just what's happening in Kenya.
Oh, absolutely. This is a story about democracy, about accountability, about how much, say, citizens really have. And that's something that resonates everywhere.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's a crucial reminder that democracy, it takes work. It's not a spectator sport. It requires everyone to be engaged, informed, and willing to speak up.
Exactly. And to hold their leaders accountable.
Well, on that note, we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on how this all unfolds in Kenya. Thanks for joining me today and breaking it all down.
Thanks for having me.